Welcome to the weather forecast on Mr. Tien channel. Dear friends, in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down the essential information about the weather that will affect Australia over the next 7 days. And we're facing a lot of severe weather risks, especially around the southern half of Australia. Let's find out. There's a lot to look at in today's forecast update, including a strong storm that's expected to hit southeastern Australia tonight. A strong storm is moving through the Australian windward zone this morning. The storm is expected to move into Bass Strait tonight, and there's a range of strong, damaging winds, even locally damaging gusts, expected across South Australia and a large swell in southern Victoria, as well as the alpine areas of Victoria, the Australian Capital Territory and of course New South Wales. This is a very strong storm in terms of wind speeds, and it's expected to get stronger tonight. It's definitely going to be quite strong, and there are a lot of severe weather warnings that need to be followed because this is a very severe storm system. But don't panic. Stay calm in this weather event. It's triggered a very rare tornado warning with strong winds. The main threat here is with wind gusts up to 125 kilometers an hour in that severe thunderstorm warning, and there are also some rotating thunderstorms within that severe thunderstorm warning area. There's a risk of some tornadoes. As the storm moves through Adelaide, I'm very confident that we won't see any tornadoes. That's actually very good news. And you can see the main edge of this cold front is now starting to move towards the western half of Victoria. Really moving at a high speed or not. So the storm system is moving very, very fast. And it's moving very fast. Also, some pretty strong winds behind and ahead of this storm system. You can see behind the storm system in that cold front. That's what we're very concerned about in terms of winds right now. There's been a lot of observations, particularly around Adelaide and the Adelaide Hills area, of winds in the 40 to 60 kilometers per hour range, with isolated gusts up to around 70, 80, even 90 kilometers per hour. And those strong winds extend all the way to Juna in the western half of South Australia and as far north as Yanta, 46 kilometers per hour to the northwest, before the cold front comes in. We've also had some strong winds south of Melbourne at South Channel Island, 48 kilometers per hour, heading north. Melbourne Airport has been blowing pretty strong over the last 24 hours. There were gusts of up to around 120 kilometers per hour in the park in Hogan Island here, with 61 kilometers per hour, with gusts up to 100 kilometers per hour. So even miles ahead of this storm front. There were some very strong wind observations recorded. Very strong winds, certainly coming into Victoria ahead of the cold front that you can see moving into the western half of the state right now. The winds are not expected to be as strong as they will be behind this system, and I'm sure everyone in South Australia can attest to that. Whereas the leading edge of the cold front as it moves across the main storm front is very intense, very sharp, and some strong winds have been reported. It's definitely the cold air mass behind this weather system that will be the strongest and most persistent. So that's the part to watch in the western half of this weather system. As you can see right now, the system is expected to move further west over the next few hours. A very strong and quite intense weather system. It's likely to move into Basra this afternoon, then move across the Furneaux Islands around midnight and into the Tasmanian Sea very early tomorrow morning. So it's going to move very quickly towards the south of Australia, which means that the impacts will be short, strong, but certainly quite intense. You can see wind speeds averaging 80 to 100 kilometers an hour in some places tonight, particularly on the back of this system. Once you get past the main front that's coming through and the winds quickly turn south, you're going to have about an hour and a half of very strong winds, particularly for the south coast of Victoria and South Australia. That's where the wind speeds will be at their strongest. You can see right now those really strong winds haven't really hit the South Australian coast yet. Over the next few hours, they'll form between the Murray-Darling River towards Robb and Mount Gambier, and then early this afternoon between Aro and Mount Gambier, and then towards the Victorian, South Australian border. Overnight, we expect these strong winds to move towards the western half of Victoria. The maximum gusts could be around 125 kilometers per hour. Then they'll move into Port Phillip Bay and the Melbourne area around midnight at their strongest. And early tomorrow morning, around 4 a.m. tomorrow, when Melbourne will be hit by some very strong winds. These winds will then continue to move east. And as you can see, this system will move into the Tasman Sea early tomorrow morning. You can see it moving quite far out into the Tasman Sea by sunrise around 6 a.m. These winds are dominating the Gibson coastline. We expect wind gusts to average around 70 to 80 kilometers an hour. If not much higher in some parts of the Gippsland coast, they could reach 110 kilometers an hour in some places. And then as this system moves out of the Tasman Sea into the Tasman Sea, you can see very strong winds starting to develop into the southeast corner of New South Wales and Victoria. And we expect wind speeds to exceed 110 kilometers an hour for extended periods across Eelauer and the southeast coast of New South Wales. Not to mention very strong winds will also be reported in the alpine areas of New South Wales, even through the Blue Mountains, up into the Hunter Valley and even into the granite belt of southeast Queensland. Some strong gusts are expected to be reported. But how strong will these winds be? For the South Australian coast, they won't be much more than 120 kilometers. Now, we'll see the strongest gusts moving into the Robe area late this morning and early this afternoon, with peak gusts expected to be around 120 kilometers per hour. Then, gusts will increase to around 130 kilometers per hour on the back of this weather system, around the southern New South Wales area, which is the South Australian-Victorian border. By around 8 p.m., we'll see gusts of 120 to 130 kilometers per hour and gusts of 125 to 130 kilometers per hour expected to move through Waterall and Apollo Bay. Areas further west of Melbourne are expected to see the strongest gusts in Victoria. Melbourne will still be affected after midnight, particularly around 1 or 2 a.m. tomorrow morning. We're expecting gusts there in excess of 120 kilometers per hour, particularly around the airport and some of the flatter locations into the Melbourne metropolitan area. And then gusts could also be in excess of 125 kilometers per hour into the hills adjacent to Melbourne. We're expecting very strong winds across the Snowy Mountains and the Victorian Alps. Gusts could be as high as 140 kilometers per hour in some places there. You can see some very strong winds that are expected to develop if they haven't already. But throughout the rest of this morning, some very strong gusts are expected to develop across the New South Wales Highlands and also the Victorian Highlands. In fact, gusts could reach 140 kilometers per hour during or before this frontal system passes through, which is clearly blizzard conditions. Those are really dangerous gusts. This is really intense. Then you can see this system losing momentum as it goes straight through Bass Strait and then into the Tasman Sea. It's going to be a little bit weaker for the Gippsland coast. The gusts shouldn't be in excess of 110 kilometers per hour for the Gippsland coast. But we're still going to see some very strong gusts across a lot of the stations into Bass Strait. So keep that in mind. Some gusts could reach 125 kilometers per hour into Bass Strait. And Bass Strait is famous for that, the wave heights. Given that these waves are coming from the south, they're not going to be the strong ocean waves that can cause all sorts of problems around the central coast of Victoria, but particularly the west coast of Victoria around Warner, or anywhere west of Apollo Bay and this point on the Victorian coast. We're going to see some really significant wave heights. It's a very short period for waves of this magnitude, and there's expected to be significant coastal erosion. Wave heights are also expected to be significant on the Bass Strait itself, averaging 4 to 6 meters tonight with an even narrower wave period of 9 to 11 seconds. That's going to lead to some very significant coastal erosion if it gets caught up on the Victorian coast. They're also coming out from the south, particularly the west coast of Victoria, putting them in prime position to be hit by these waves almost overnight. So extremely dangerous coastal conditions are expected to extend all the way down to the Hunter Coast and almost all the way up to the mid-northern coast of New South Wales from early tomorrow morning into late tomorrow afternoon, as the back of this weather system brings very strong winds to Alawa and the southeast coast of New South Wales. While they are not expected to be completely affected by this weather system, in reality the impact there will be quite minimal and it will be a fairly typical winter weather system. We could still be talking about 50 to 55 millimeters in some areas of the west coast of Tassie. Rainfall will also be quite far into Victoria. Mildura is expected to get a few and will also be moving into southern New South Wales. Some good accumulations could also be in the 5 to 15 millimeters range. Of course, the snowfall is what most people are very concerned about with this weather system, with the possibility of a few centimeters of snow on the highest peaks of the Flinders Ranges. Particularly in the Adelaide Hills, around Mount Lofty, around 700 meters or so, into the Adelaide Hills area and around 600 meters into the Flinders Ranges area. We could be talking about some dusting snow later today and into early tonight. With the upcoming showers and the cold front coming in behind this weather system, there is a chance of some snow. Some very rare snow in the Adelaide Hills. Definitely something to keep an eye on. It's been very, very cold in Adelaide, and it's expected to stay that way. Temperatures will drop from here on out. Heavy snow is expected across the Victorian Alps and into the New South Wales Highlands. Some reports are forecasting up to a meter of snow in some parts of Victoria around Mount Hod and Mount Bull. The official forecast is for 50 to 70 centimeters of snow, and I'm expecting widespread amounts of 30 centimeters or more. Snowfall above 1,200 meters is expected in large parts of Victoria and also in the snowy mountains of New South Wales. A few centimeters of snow is also possible around Baurst and Lithgow, as well as around Orange, and light snow may also fall towards Canberra. Bington Peak may also see some light snow, but not much in the northern parts of New South Wales. We may even see some light snow on the hills around Melbourne at around 600 or 700 meters in the Melbourne area. That drops to 200 meters in Tasmania. So we may see light snow falling into the Hobart suburbs or into the Hobart suburbs, with some areas only getting about 1 centimeter. It's not expected to be a big snowfall. But it's definitely snowing, and you may see some snowflakes in the inner city of Hobart as well as Tasmania. This is just a typical winter front, so there's no need to panic. There's no need to prepare like a cyclone or a flood. But definitely be aware of this weather phenomenon. Definitely be aware of how severe it is. And definitely be aware of the strength of some of the gusty winds tonight. That's going to affect Southeast Australia, and it's going to affect the winter weather forecast. At least for the next few days. There's not much to say about the winds in South Australia. You can see that the southwest of Western Australia is not going to see any signs of winter weather until around Friday next week, September 5th or 6th. Rainfall is expected to be a minor issue for Queensland, or not really a problem, but we are expecting it to increase in the forecast after September 4th. The rain that we talked about, oh boy! The rain that we talked about, with a slight chance of it in the central part of the Northern Territory in Queensland in yesterday's update. So we'll be keeping a close eye on that rain. It certainly had an impact on the rainfall forecast in North Queensland. It's forecasted to be less rain towards the Cassowary Coast and even some rain for us. It looks like that forecast could still come true, but there's definitely still a bit of uncertainty in the far north of Queensland. The 100 millimeters of accumulated rainfall that we talked about in yesterday's forecast update is now a little less likely. Thank you for watching the news on Mr Tien channel. Have a nice day. See you in the next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below. Please share the video to help everyone.